overwhelmed with joy, and immediately they went to the bank of the Ganges to bathe in her waters. Their minds full of happiness, they chanted the Hare Krishna mantra and gave charity by mental strength. In this way, all the devotees, whoever they were situated in every city and every country, danced, performed Sankirtana, and gave charity by mental strength on the plea of the lunar eclipse, their minds overwhelmed with joy. All sorts of respectable Brahmana, gentlemen, and ladies carrying plates filled with various gifts came with their presentations, seeing the newborn child, whose from resembled natural glaring gold, all of them happily offered their blessings. Dressing themselves as the wives of Brahmanas, all the celestial ladies, including the wives of Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Narsimhadev, King Indra, and Vasishtha Rishi, along with Ramba, a dancing girl of heaven, came there with varieties of gifts. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a newborn baby, he was visited by the neighboring ladies, most of whom were the wives of respectable Brahmanas. In the dress of Brahmanas, wives, celestial ladies like the wives of Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva also came to see the newborn child. Ordinary people saw them as respectable Brahmana ladies of the neighborhood, but actually they were all celestial ladies dressed in that way.
Just a brief comment here. So I'm just trying to blend in some philosophical understanding of what exactly happens when Krishna comes either personally or when he takes an incarnation, or he comes as Krishna himself in the guise of a devotee like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You will never find Krishna alone. That is a cornerstone of our understanding of God. God means with his energies. And how does Prabhupada explain it to us? King means kingdom, queens, army, treasury, subjects. Otherwise, there is no meaning to the word king. Like in India, after the British left, we have the landlord system. But the government of India, they took away their land. So they are lords in name only. That's not the kind of God Krishna is. So our endeavor in becoming God conscious is kind of twofold. We understand God as a person and God's energies. I'm giving you a very, very daily life, totally mundane, commonplace experience. From our temple, we go on Harinam, chanting Harinam every day, and we were at our beach, Isman Chowpatty. There is a beach nearby, very famous beach. One evening, we just saw that the normal traffic was kind of controlled in such a way that the chief minister of Maharashtra state, his 6 or 7 cars were allowed to pass without any traffic restrictions. So for normally there is yellow means slow down, red means complete stop. So he's a big boss. He doesn't need to follow the regulations which ordinary people have to. But at the same time, how do you give this particular fleet of cars that kind of passage? So we just saw that the Mumbai police arranged things in such a way that, like, the moment they come to know that the chief boss is coming, immediately the the next traffic signal kind of goes into suspension mode. There is no signal there. The police, the cop there, he controls people, tells people, go away, go away, go this way, go this way. And within a span of about 15 minutes, the moment the main car and the security people, they go to the next traffic light, they release the traffic for the previous one. And then they stop for the next one coming, so that that route becomes very clear. And I was talking to one devotee. For a mundane chief minister, there are so many energies working just to make his life comfortable. Now, in today's Kali Yuga times, no leader is secure. Like Prithu Maharaj, he would come and meet his people without any security around him. Today's political leaders are so insecure in their own country that anybody can just put a bomb or put a bullet. So there has to be so much of security restrictions. I'm not saying it should not be done, but I'm just saying that's the reality. So we should also use our intelligence to understand that how does it say that in outer space all the demigods, uh, like in this next verse here, Gandharvaloka, Siddhaloka, Charanloka, they offered their prayers and they all came to see. Why not? Why not? This particular event of Krishna appearing in a universe, although it is so special, it is so unique, it is happening at every moment. Every moment Krishna is leaving a particular universe, finishing his pastimes, and he is also entering a universe. Later in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we'll come to know that this is the way in which Krishna appears and leaves a particular universe. Like the sun appearing on it appears in the eastern horizon, but it is always up there, whether the midday sun is somewhere or the sun is setting somewhere. Like right now it is 6:30, 6:40 in India. It was 6:40 to the east of India 20 minutes ago. To the west of India, after 20 minutes, it will be 6:40. So whichever time you choose, that time will always be there in the world somewhere. Maybe it is a bit complicated to understand, but this is how Prabhupada says, if you get this one correct, that the sun is a material planet, but because of its power, because of its size, it can be visible throughout the 24 hours. Why not Krishna? Why can't Krishna be in the entire material manifestation and at the same time in his own abode also? Goloka eva nivasati. He only resides in Goloka. Akhila Atma Bhuta. And is also spread everywhere. So that was a small observation on what we are reading now. If you don't have any questions, we can go ahead in your reading.
Shall I continue, Prabhuji?
Please go ahead.
In the outer space, all the demigods, including the inhabitants of Gandharvaloka, Siddhaloka, and Charanloka, offered their prayers and danced to the accompaniment of music, songs, and the beating of drums. Similarly, in the Navadvip city, all the professional dancers, musicians, and blessers gathered together, dancing in great jubilation. Purport: as there are professional singers, dancers, and reciters of prayers in the heavenly planets, so in India still there are professional dancers, blessers, and singers, all of whom assemble together during householder ceremonies, especially marriages and birth ceremonies. These professional men earn their livelihood by taking charity on such occasions from the homes of the Hindus. Eunuchs also.
Eunuchs.
Eunuchs means, Prabhu?
Eunuchs means, in India, they clap their hands and they ask for charity.
Oh,
Transgender
yes,
people.
okay. Okay.
Well, are they called transgenders? Because
Yes, Prabhuji.
they are born like that in India. and
Mm.
they have their own community. Their voice is like male, but
Mm.
they dress in female dress,
Mm.
and they especially go where there are newborn babies, and then they expect charity. I'll explain briefly once you read the whole purport.
Sure, Prabhu. Eunuchs also take advantage of such ceremonies to receive charity. That is their means of livelihood. Such men never become servants or engage themselves in agriculture or business occupations. They simply take charity from neighborhood friends to maintain themselves peacefully. The Bhattas are a class of Brahmanas who go to such ceremonies to offer blessings by composing poems with references to the Vedic scriptures.
Now, this may seem strange, this may seem very unusual, or mostly people in the West may just criticize this. That how come somebody just lives by blessing others? Go get a job, work hard, travel in the metro, and sweat yourself. Right or wrong, good or bad, there will always be a class in society who may not fit as a intellectual, as a warrior or an administrator, as a merchant or a businessman, or even as a assistant to all the upper three. What do they do? What is their hope? So Vedic culture kind of acknowledges that, like Prabhupada says here, there are professional dancers who just dance, whatever be the occasion. Blessers. Now, you could be surprised that somebody could be having his profession as giving blessings. But the fact is, please don't think that every household has to spend a lot of money on all these people. We are only talking of a few privileged householders who can do that, and they can support this class of people. So a king or a landlord may feed the entire kingdom, the landlord may feed the entire village, and a simple family may just call their neighborhood 2 3 other families, but they would not neglect these class of people because they know that they don't have any other means of livelihood. So the singers, dancers, blazers, they all come together. Eunuchs, transgender as they are known, what kind of uh, they are kind of shunned away from all public performances. They won't be called for uh, auspicious ceremonies or whatever. Now, please try to understand how does one, why does one support them? I have did a little bit of introspection here, and in a society where there is so much of stress on being God conscious, by eating Krishna Prasad, at least they are prevented from becoming gross criminals. When they come and they ask blessings, like the transgender people in India, it is told that it is very auspicious that they bless a newborn child. And someone told me, I'm not sure whether it is completely accurate or not. They bless that, may you never be born like one of us. That is their blessing. That we are born like this, maybe we have done something condemned in the past, but we bless you that you should not have uh, such a birth in your future lives. So parents feel, oh, they have this prerogative. For example, how auspicious is a crow cawing at your window? Now, in America, you may not have this, but in India, those who have stayed, it is really irritating. The sound is not melodious or whatever. The crow congregates near garbage dumps, eats the most Tamoguni, most mode of ignorance, kind of rotting, uh, kind of food stuff. But after a person dies, the only bird you want to come and touch that Vishnu Prasad is a crow. Is it not? So he's given that service. It's a very condemned birth. Just a simple example. In this lockdown period, in our temple courtyard, there's a large tree, Udumbara tree, and one very strange black bird came there. I don't even know what species it is. The male and female, they have a small nest, and they hatch their eggs. My goodness, what sweet sound this bird makes. And I was just thinking, black, crow is black, this small bird is black. The crow is much bigger in size, this is much smaller in size. I would chanting my japa, but I would sit there just to hear that bird make its very sweet sound. And in the other room where I have my table and desk, and there is a window there, and a bird and a crow comes every afternoon. Maybe that's his habit. And every time I go out and say, "Hey, get out!" Why? Because that sound really is irritating. I mean, what melody is there in a crow's cawing? But it is all relative. I I tell myself, hey, they're all parts of Krishna's creation. Who do you think you are? You is your sound so melodious? Are you really contributing to the environment or something? You're also a burden on society. But the fact is that society has to be governed in such a way that even the least of the units, even the least of people, birds, animals, they have their role to play. And it is the responsibility of the leaders to meditate and understand and engage everyone. In the life of Prabhupada, this is what people saw. One of the most, and this is my last point here, one of the most inspiring things about the service of book distribution is Prabhupada telling a group of devotees in Los Angeles that even a small book which you distribute, and even if it makes 5 cents, 5 cent is what is the value of 5 cents in America? Even at that time, it was not much. He said, "Your 5 cents will buy me a brick for building Mayapur." Now imagine a new bhakta or someone going out and distributing just one small book in a day, but he takes rest feeling that, oh, I have contributed one brick for building Srila Prabhupada's Mayapur program. Now, this is the essence of leadership. We'll all like in our temple, we always value the one who is the best pujari, the best singer, the best cook, the best preacher. Okay, you give class because your classes are the best. Fine. That quality, that difference of class will always be there. But not to neglect somebody who is at the lowest ladder, the lowest rung of the ladder, as they say. So these are some observations about these aspects of Vedic culture which we see in uh, when we read Srila Prabhupada's explanation of, like, we are being transported 500 years ago. I stay in India, many of you are from India, some of you have never been there. So we read these purports, we read the translation, and we think that, does it all happen now also? Is Prabhupada telling us about something which is happening right now? Maybe or may not be. But Prabhupada is trying to give a glimpse of a culture which is our goal of life. So please continue further.
Prabhu, if someone wants to continue, please, I mean, they can take their turn.
I
No,
can.
you didn't read much. You can go ahead.
Yeah, sure, bro. Yeah, I love reading, but I'm thinking I'm reading too much. Translation: no one could understand who was coming and who was going, who was dancing and who was singing. They understand one another's language. Yet all unhappiness and lamentation were immediately dissipated, and people became all jubilant. Thus, Jagannath Mishra was also overwhelmed with joy. Chandrasekhar Acharya and Srivas Thakura both came to Jagannath Mishra and drew his attention in various ways. They performed the ritualistic ceremonies prescribed at the time of birth according to religious principles. Jagannath Mishra also gave varieties of charity. Whatever riches Jagannath Mishra collected in the form of gifts and presentations, and whatever he had in his house, he distributed among the Brahmanas, professional singers, dancers, bhattas, and the poor. He honored them all by giving them riches in the charity. The wife of Srivas Thakura, whose name was Malini, accompanied by the wife of Chandrasekhara, Acharya Ratna, and other ladies, came there in a great happiness to worship the baby with paraphernalia such as vermilion, turmeric, oil, fused rice, bananas, and coconuts. Purport: vermilion, kai, fused rice, bananas, coconuts, and turmeric mixed with oil are all auspicious gifts for, for such a ceremony. As there is puffed rice, so there is another preparation of rice called kai, a or fused rice, which along with bananas is taken as very auspicious presentation. Also, turmeric mixed with oil and vermilion makes an auspicious ointment that is smeared over the body of a newborn baby or a person who is going to marry. These are all auspicious activities in family affairs. We see that 500 years ago, at the birth of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all these ceremonies were performed rigidly, but at present, such ritualistic performance hardly ever takes place. Generally, a pregnant mother is sent to the hospital, and as soon as her child is born, he is washed with an antiseptic, and this concludes everything.
Actually, see, this is how sometimes when we read Prabhupada's purports, we get an understanding of is Prabhupada saying we should be kind of doing everything as we did 500 years ago or 5,000 years ago? Not really. Not to be imitated uh, artificially, but the essence has to be taken. The way I understand it, in a highly cultured society, if I am happy, I tend to give more charity. That is the essence. Why are you giving charity? Oh, because I am happy. Like a birthday. Today is my birthday. So, current culture says, so you should become the center of attraction. You count the number of gifts given, you see whether they are better than the gifts you got last year, whether they are more expensive, how much money you have spent on your birthday ceremony, the party. That's like a totally changed understanding of a birthday. If it's your birthday, you go to the temple, you give charity, you go to some places where you never go before, help other members of society. I was in Goa, and there is a big industrial family there. So this person is connected with them. He married the daughter of the big industry boss. He told me that he has two sons, and on their birthdays, he takes them to either the juvenile prison department, where there are prisoners who are younger than 18 years kept there. He takes them to the old age homes. I said, "Why do you do that?" He said, that's how I instill in my sons that on this special day, you have to be seen as serving society. Otherwise, you may think you are the center of that center of attraction. So rather than celebrating a birthday like that, where your false ego gets bloated, your false ego gets puffed up. Normally, people say, this is the only special day in my life. Make it real special by understanding what's your role in society. So, this is something which we can learn from these small aspects of Vedic culture.
Can I continue, Prabhuji?
Yes, please go ahead.
One day, shortly after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born, Advaita Acharya's wife, Sita Devi, who is worshipable by the whole world, took her husband's permission and went to see the topmost child with all kinds of gifts and presentations. Purport: it appears that Advaita Acharya had two different houses, one at Santipura and one at Navadvipa. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born, Advaita Acharya was residing not at his Navadvipa house but at his Santipura house. Therefore, as formerly explained, text 99, from Advaita's old paternal house, Nijalaya, in Santipura, Sita came to Navadvipa to present gifts to the newborn child, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. She bought different kinds of golden ornaments, including armlets, necklaces, anklets, and bangles for the hands. There were also tiger nails set in gold, waist decorations of silk and lace, ornaments for the hands and legs, nicely printed silken saris, and a child's garment also made of silk. Many other riches, including gold and silver coins, were also presented to the child. Purport: from the gifts presented by Sita Thakurani, Advaita Acharya's wife, it appears that Advaita Acharya was at that time a very rich man. Although Brahmanas are not the rich men of society, Advaita Acharya, being the leader of the Brahmanas in Santipura, was considerably well-to-do. Therefore, he presented many ornaments to the baby, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But Kamalakanta Vivasha, asking for 300 rupees from the king of Jagannath Puri, Maharaj Prataprudra, on the plea that Advaita Acharya was in debt for that amount, indicates that such a rich man who could present many valuable ornaments, saris, etc., though it difficult to repay 300 rupees. Therefore, the value of a rupee at that time was many thousands of times what it is now. At present, no one feels difficulty over a debt of 300 rupees, nor can an ordinary man accumulate such valuable ornaments to present to friend's son. Probably the value of 300 rupees at that time was equal to the present value of 30,000 rupees.
Okay, here is a thing which some of you might not be knowing. Prabhupada is mentioning a particular incident. This Kamalakanta Vishwas is a character from Jagannath Puri, and he tells the king, Maharaj Pratap Rudra, that, O king, I accept that Advaita Acharya is Mahavishnu, but he still owes me 300 rupees. So Prabhupada makes a very important, poignant comment there. This will come later in Chaitanya Charitamrita. That, hey, only one of these two statements can be considered true and authentic. If you have a realization that he is Mahavishnu, how can he be a debtor for 300 rupees from you? Or if you say that no, he owes me 300 rupees and I want them back, then you don't say that, oh, I also accept him as Mahavishnu. When I first read this, I thought, what kind of, it looks childish. to put such a thing in a important book like Chaitanya Charitamrita. But later, yeah, upon discussing with some seniors, I could understand, especially Bhakti Vigyan Goswami from Moscow. I have seen him repeat this point many times. Today, we have a problem of what he calls philosophical atheism. Especially in America, we have people who write books. There is no God. God is not great. They come on TV talk shows, and it's like heavy, heavy, heavy. And the kind of arguments they put forward is, look, there was an earthquake here. Look, there was a tsunami here. Look, somebody was born with this cancer, or a baby got burnt in this hospital fire. Where is this blankety blank God of yours? And what is it doing? And why does God allow evil? This is called philosophical atheism, intellectual atheism. You're not convinced that this world could be made by a creator. And if it is made by someone, then why it has so many defects? There is another type of atheism where, and this mainly happens to people who are born in families which have some bit of a religious tradition, not the structured understanding which Prabhupada gives, but mostly just do this, just bow down, just put a flower over here, come to the temple with me. So that is called psychological atheism or emotional atheism. You are not exactly sure the shraddha, the faith which is needed is not that strong. So many times we may come before Krishna and say, Krishna, I know this is a big problem. I don't think even you can do anything about it. Well, if you think Krishna cannot do anything about it, then whom do you go to tell? You tell your own mind, you tell your own ego. And in this way, you feel, actually, I am in a better position to solve this problem. But since all these years I'm hearing that Krishna is God, Krishna is God, as a matter of formality, I go and just tell him that. So we need to be careful. The first kind of atheism can be rectified with a proper sadhana, nourishing your intellect, like we are discussing Prabhupada's purports. That goes a long way. The emotional or psychological atheism, you have to have strong association of devotees. You follow the formula given by Rupa Goswami, where you open up your mind in confidence. You acknowledge that I have this issue. You go to someone who has that uh, experience to help you with. Both of them can be addressed, both of them can be sorted out. No doubt about that. But these are the two, and that's why this particular story becomes important. Yeah. Any questions, any points in this regard now?
So there, Prabhupada says in his purpose, like that 300 rupees is like equivalent to 30,000. This is like 50 years back, 40 years back, right, Prabhuji? So now it is like equivalent to 30 lakhs.
Well, Prabhupada is saying at that time means 500 years ago. Oh, yeah. Probably the value of 300 rupees at that time was equal to the present value of 30,000. No, he is comparing those 300 with today's 30,000.
That is Prabhupada's time.
Yeah, Prabhupada's time. Now it could be 100 times more also. Correct.
Yeah.
Shall I continue, Prabhuji?
Please go ahead.
Riding in a palanquin covered with cloth and accompanied by maidservants, Sita Thakurani came to the house of Jagannath Mishra, bringing with her many auspicious articles such as fresh grass, paddy, gorochna, turmeric, kunkuma, and sandalwood. All these presentations filled a large basket. Purport: the words Vastragupta Dola are very significant in this verse. Even 50 or 60 years ago in Calcutta, all respectable ladies would go to a neighboring place riding on a palanquin carried by 4 men. The palanquin was covered with soft cotton, and in that way, there was no chance of seeing a respectable lady traveling in public. Ladies, especially those coming from respectable families, could not be seen by ordinary men. This system is still current in remote places. The Sanskrit word Ashurya Pasya indicates that a respectable lady could not be seen even by the sun. In the Oriental culture, this system was very prevalent and was strictly observed by respectable ladies, both Hindu and Muslim. We have actual experience in our childhood that our mother would not walk even next door to observe an invitation. Rather, she would go in either a carriage or a palanquin carried by 4 men. This custom was also strictly followed 500 years ago, and the wife of Advaita Acharya, being a very respectable lady, observed the customary rules current in that social environment.
So, ladies, any comments here? Okay, again, something which has gone way beyond our society's restrictions or protocol today. Why do we read that? Why do we understand that? We try to understand the essence of something. When Prabhupada says respectable, does it mean that those ladies who work today, those who are having their own businesses, those who are having their own, I mean, commercial operations or maintaining a family, how does one relate to that? Well, Kali Yuga is a place and a time of disrupting everything. So things which were done in the past, you cannot just cling to the past saying that unless physically things come like that, I cannot move, I cannot accept Vedic culture. No. What were the things Srila Prabhupada got a shock when he first landed in New York? Huge skyscrapers, people working like anything, day and night. Like I've been to New York and they say this is the greatest city in the world, a city which never sleeps. I'm never sleeping. There are now sleep clinics where they analyze you for 8 hours and then they prescribe things. Our life has become so artificial that even a good night's rest, it depends on pills and depends on so many other things. So from one angle, the whole thing is a sham. The whole thing in Ishopanishad Prabhupada writes, this modern civilization is like a colossal hoax. Very strong words. The whole thing is fake. The whole thing is based upon just crass, unrefined sense gratification. Yes, all right. How do you respond? We respond by trying to change things which we can, accepting which we can't. But we go ahead in our chanting and remembering Krishna. So, in Prabhupada's spiritual master's ashram, strictly males only. There is no question of females staying there. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, if you know, he started a small ashram called Vishnu Priya Palli, where only females can stay. Prabhupada went one step further and said, when I preach to these hippies or the young boys and girls of America, they come to me as girlfriend and boyfriend. What do I do? So he said, therefore I get them married. Prabhupada personally got them married. He personally supervised the function. 68, 69, 70, 71, 72. it became such a burden that even some of the marriages were failing. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, I no longer conduct this. I am a sannyasi, it's not my job. But now some of my Grihastha disciples are trained enough, they should do that. So just see, Prabhupada was a great adjuster. Is not a word, but I'm just making it up. Adjuster, he could adjust things. He was a great innovator. How can something be used in Krishna's service? So, today, if there are ladies who are single parents, a big scene in America, may not be so much here in India, but it's coming. How would Prabhupada solve it? Sometimes there's a flood, a social thing comes like a flood. Do you think one man with just two arms can stop that water from flowing inside a city? No. So sometimes we need to adjust. What are the things which we simply cannot change, which we cannot afford to change? And that is our core principle of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. The 9 processes of devotional service is something which is our core competency, our core principle. As long as we cling on to that, we will have to make a few adjustments. Some things we may be able to do now, something in the near future, but that's how, like, I am just training myself that when you read such things, that previously, like this word used here is asurya pasya. A sun cannot see a woman's face. So one modern Indian lady said, what's wrong with that? I mean, we should be cooped up in a dark room. You males, you just want us to be pushed in a corner. We don't have any dignity. What's wrong with the sun seeing us? I said, please try to understand. That culture was trying to give you dignity. So she was saying, I don't need your dignity. I said, that's fine. you don't need that. But the fact is that society is built upon the cooperation between male and female. And Prabhupada said they need to be peaceful, both of them. How do you do that? It's a very difficult process. Married life is different from Grihastha ashram. Mostly people say, oh, now he's becoming a Grihastha. That's like you are saying, oh, this person has joined the university and is going to become a Nobel Prize winner. Hey, not everybody gets a Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize is for achievement. You do something spectacular. So Grihastha ashram, ashrama, where you take all kinds of endeavor so that all those who are dependent upon you, they become Krishna conscious. There is a brahmachari ashram, Grihastha ashram. Those who simply come together for enjoying their material bodies, that's called a Griha Medi life. The goal is not Krishna. So of course, today, Brahmacharya ashram is a struggle, Sannyas ashram is a struggle, Grihastha ashram is also a struggle. The things which are given in Vedic culture, they are like the lubricants. They can help the gears of the machine move without causing much friction, without causing much smoke and fire coming out of it. Today's society, the leaders, the politicians, film stars, rock stars, whoever has money, they just train people, do whatever you want, just enjoy your life somehow. And if there are any accidents, well, devil may take care, who cares? So that's like a havoc. That's like total confusion. So these are some observations about what we did today. This is our last point for discussion. Any other questions or comments you might have? Otherwise, we should stop.
So, Prabhuji, I have a question, but not from today's class.
All right.
So, in chapter 2, what does it mean, like being desireless? in
Okay.
Bhakti Gita. Bhagavad Gita.
Very good question. As living spirit soul, Prabhupada uses phrase sometimes, living spirit soul, which means we are part of God. God is a supreme spirit. He is the ocean, we are the drop. He is the sun, we are the ray. He is like the gold mine, we are like a small atomic part of gold. Why I'm giving these three examples? Because quality wise, they are non different from each other. One ray is not a ray of some dark planet, it's a ray of the sun. A particle of gold is also gold, maybe a few cents worth, but gold indeed. And a drop of the ocean also is salty. You can't say that the ocean is sweet, but the drop is salty. That will never happen. So, therefore, we are living spirit souls. Does Krishna have desires? Unlimited. How does he fulfill his desires? Well, he has his potencies. One Sanskrit phrase for God is one whose desires are fulfilled almost automatically. You may say, how automatically? It's like a current example again. We don't have kings anymore, but we have these billionaires like say Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, or other Wall Street billionaires or whatever. If they just tell their servant, tomorrow I want to fly to London. Yes, sir, all arrangements are made. That's what they are habituated to hear from their servants. So if a mundane rich person has that kind of potency, Krishna certainly has multi-potencies. Parasya Shakti Vividhaiva Shriyate. So certainly God has desires. Being part of him, we also have desires. So what's the harm in having material desires? Well, that's the catch. Material desires, like right now, our current material body, take a good look at your body in your bathroom mirror. This is the result of your past desires. Put it very simply. You may say, really? I wanted a shorter nose, I wanted a taller body, I wanted more fair, I wanted a more blonde hair, I wanted this, I wanted that. Well, you get what you pay for. So you didn't pay in pious credits, so this is what you got. But I like her hair, I like his chest, I like his intelligence. Well, you have to pay for that. Now, the Bhagavad Gita tells us if you leave your body with material desires intact, that's what you get. Desire to eat more? Well, there is an elephant or a polar bear or a whale or all these big creatures. Want to defend yourself with claws and teeth, trying to be a carnivore? Those bodies are available. More sexual satisfaction? Pigeons, monkeys can have it dozens, 60 times a day. Prabhupada says a sparrow can have 60 times a day sexual satisfaction. So now an intelligent person thinks, if my desires are unlimited, how do I take care of them? I know that I cannot satisfy them. But at the same time, I don't want any material desires. So there are other philosophers like Buddhist philosophy, they say, make your desires zero. That's a good way to solve the situation. Well, it's not as easy as they say. In fact, when you say, I should not be having a desire, I should not be having any desires, that becomes one desire. So the Krishna conscious way of understanding is, number one, I am having desires because I am part of Krishna. Krishna has his desires fulfilled by his multipotencies. So when I am told to be desireless, I should not be having material desires. But then how do I achieve my goal? Do not be attached to not having desires. Spiritualize your desires. So if there are two circles, if you can imagine two circles, in one circle you are always fighting that I should not have desires, I have to become desireless, desireless, desireless. Pretty much we are very weak in Kali Yuga, we don't have that much brain. But if you go to the other circle where unlimited chances for having desires, you want to eat something good, cook with a devotional mindset that these ingredients have come from Krishna. My intelligence to cook this item also comes from Krishna, and I'm offering it to Krishna. So singing, dancing, cooking, decorating, earning money, all kinds of desires can be accommodated when you make Krishna the center of your desires. So this is the sum and substance of being desireless.